Welcome to More Than Work, the podcast reminding you that your self-worth is defined by more than your job title. I'm Rabia, an IT project manager, comedian, nonprofit volunteer, and sometimes activist. Every week, I'll chat with a guest about pursuing passions outside of work or creating meaningful opportunities inside the workplace. As you listen, I hope you'll be inspired to do the same. Well, this week we have someone who is really special to me because we worked together and then been friends for many, many years. And I'm just so impressed with everything he's done. And also, he's actually my person that I go to for advice most of the time. He's Jim Ransier, operations wing person and White Salmon City Council member. Hey, Jim.
Hey, how are you?
Good. How are you?
Good. Very excited to be on your podcast.
All right.
This is good times.
Yeah, I'm excited too. And I know it's sunny. So you're in Washington. So let's first say, what is White Salmon? Because I just said that, but.
So White Salmon is a city of about 2,200 people on the Oregon-Washington border on the Columbia River. We're about an hour east of Portland, Oregon. So anyone who's ever been to this area knows it's gorgeous. It's near Mount Hood, Mount Adams, and lots of outdoor activities, wine tasting region. It really is a little kind of mini paradise as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah, that's awesome. And it's funny because I'm in London and you're in Washington, both places not known for extreme sunlight, but we both had sunny days today.
That's right. Yeah, I can't say that I didn't complain a little bit that the sun came out just because it's in my eyes at the moment. But, I'll take it where I can get it.
Yeah. So let's first of all just start with just maybe let you introduce a little bit about what you're doing right now, and then we'll just go in and chat about everything from before and now.
Yeah, from a career perspective, I have a pretty lengthy background in kind of e-commerce startups and operations. So everything from customer service operations to kind of like creative or studio operations. I've worked on the retail side. I worked on the B2B side. And so just, a lot of process and project related activities in my career. And then separately of that, recently joined the White Salmon City Council as council member number 4, position 4. And also kind of in the middle of all of that between personal and professional, also started my own consulting business on the side as well. Definitely, clearly I know how to keep busy.
Yeah, you're not one of the people who said you wished you had time and then really ended up with a ton of time during this pandemic because you do a lot.
That's right. That's right. Yeah. One of these days, though, I'm going to learn how to relax a little bit more than I do.
Well, good luck. I believe you. So just kind of thinking about your career, first of all, because I think this will resonate with a lot of people. You worked in places like a startup, and then we worked together for quite a while in what was more of a big e-commerce company. I mean, they were, hundreds of millions of dollars kind of company a year.
Sure.
And then you went to another startup to big company and then to your own thing. And now you're going into, I think, a smaller company. And so how have you found those transitions, and what have you looked for in those different kind of companies? And how have you found, like, I guess, keeping yourself, like keeping true to yourself, put it that way. And, as you transitioned, a lot of people, and why I'm asking this, I'll just say, is a lot of people will say, oh, I don't want to be in a big company. I want to be in a startup, or, oh, I can't do the startup thing. And I think you've successfully done all of them. So how have you managed that?
Yeah, I do think it's probably a mindset more than the environment that you're in. So for me, having been through kind of companies where I was, within the first, 20 to 30 employees, and companies where, to your point, where we worked together, where there's, definitely 1,000 or more employees spread out over the country. I'd say that the mindset really for me is really about building relationships, I mean, it sounds cheesy and corny actually, but it really is true. Like the successes come from the approach, being able to properly, yeah, how do I even say that? Like it really does come from approach, which is showing genuine interest in you both the company's success and your peers and coworkers and superiors and everyone, but also just like I guess coming at it from a place of curiosity. Like I don't ever pretend to know much of anything. Like I show up intentionally, like who am I to say whether or not I know how to do something or not do something? It changes in each job. So I guess there's an adaptability piece there too, to what makes it successful. But really for me, I guess if I were to just recap that kind of meander, there is very much about adaptability, very much about curiosity, and very much about building kind of solid work relationships, knowing that no matter where you're at, small or big company, you have to work well with those around you. Otherwise it doesn't work out.
Mm-hmm. That's true. And you're someone who has been both an individual contributor and a manager of people.
Yeah.
And have you found that building relationships is a little bit different when people are reporting to you versus when you're really kind of, the individual contributor and you don't have people reporting to you, so your relationships are more like lateral, say, for example?
Good question. Yeah. I wouldn't, it's funny because it's instinctually when you ask the question, my response is no, there is no difference, because I think, and there might be some finesse there, but I would say how I treat people, whether they report to me, I report to them, or we are peers, I feel like is the same. And I think that's actually probably been one of the larger successes of my career, is that without sounding like tooting my own horn, everyone who I've ever received feedback from has said that they really appreciated that approach, that I've always been very approachable and very interested in their success and interested in helping, and that just genuine caring of people, whether they report to you or not. That's not something that you can fake. It's you either do care or you don't, and that's okay. Like there's times when I totally get it that there's people that don't, but I can't actually operate without genuinely caring about people. And so I think that has been a success for me, in that whether I've been an individual contributor or a manager, that feeling that people get when talking with me is that I care about them, and it is true. Like I don't know how to operate without caring about something. In fact, it makes me think of a little brief side story, which is there was someone who reported to me, and she definitely was a new manager. She wasn't interested. She genuinely wasn't interested in the success of one of her employees. Like it was just the employee was struggling, and I remember giving her feedback of like, hey, here's just a little idea. Like maybe just genuinely try and get to know them. Like find out who they are as a person, and just show some interest and curiosity in who they are. And she, 2 weeks later, she came back. It's like, I tried what you did, and it was the best conversation that we ever had. And it was really, 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 it was a really, really positive relationship. And I said, oh, so do you feel like you care? You're really invested? And she's like, no, I was faking it. I still don't care about them. But it really well when I at least pretended that I did. And I said, well, maybe the next step, to get feedback, next step is perhaps you should also care, actually genuinely care and not fake it. But I go baby steps, right? Like baby steps to first, fake it till you make it. But then, there's a point when maybe you should get to a point where you feel like you could care for real. Needless to say, she did not stay a manager of people long, because I don't think you can manage people, a group of people, without being invested. So
no, that's. I was trying not to laugh too loud. I mean, I could always just cut me out, but that's interesting, right? I mean, because I think I know we're similar. I mean, I know that. And so pretending I don't care is what I have to do. Right.
Yeah. I don't want to sound, sometimes I try not to sound as invested as I am. Yeah.
And she's like, maybe you can care less about this, Jim.
Yeah, I guess that would have been good upward feedback to me,
Yeah.
I guess.
Yeah, wouldn't that be funny? Like you do the reviews, like the 180s, I guess. Are they 180s or 360s or someone else? Like your employee would.
It's 360.
I always try to envision, like, am I just turning around, like getting feedback from whoever? But yeah, and she's like, oh, he could care much less about.
Yeah, exactly. So yeah, I mean, just to bring it back to what you said though, or what you were asking about, like for me, it really is the ability to, whether you're an individual contributor or manager of people. I guess, going back to the finesse of that, I would say that I don't think you can be a successful manager. Or let me phrase that. I don't think you would enjoy being a manager if you don't get invested in your people. I think as an individual contributor, that is a great place for someone who struggles to identify or relate to their team, because then you're not, at least then it's just between you and your manager, and it's not some type of weird trickle down to the rest of the team.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I agree. No, and it's interesting though, because I think a lot of people think they need to like show off to one level and not the other. And to me, it's like be your best. I mean, to everyone, right? And
right.
Yeah. If you're being genuine, then it's like, if you're being genuine, you're not kissing up to the boss and whatever. You're just being a genuine person who cares about people. And yeah,
I've never had an employee who didn't appreciate me genuinely caring about their success. And like, if you start from that spot, if you start from a really genuine and caring point of view, giving difficult feedback is easier as well, because it's like, I'm sharing this feedback with you because I want you to be successful. I don't want you to be in trouble. I don't want you, like, I don't start from a place of like, how can I get rid of this person? I start from a place of like, how can I elevate this person? And so I think if you start, there's certainly managers that don't operate like that, and I tend to avoid that type of environment as quickly as possible. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. So when you think about, because you're someone who I would say, just having worked with you and knowing a lot of your career as you've gone through it, you're someone who truly does like operations and operational work and process. Is that a fair thing to say?
It is, yeah.
Because otherwise the entire rest of it is out the window.
I'm not sure what we would talk about, but yeah.
Yeah, well, that's it. But yeah, so thinking about that, I mean, you found an area that you really love, and so you've been able to then enjoy and like get fulfillment out of work in a way that some people haven't, because they're in roles they don't like. And what is it about like operations and process that you enjoy, I guess?
Yeah, I'd say I also feel like I fill an interesting niche of operations, because I'm definitely not, I know what I'm not, right? Like I think most people do better at knowing what they aren't versus what they are. But I would say, I know I'm not doing like Toyota Kata level process, right? I'm not a black belt, in Six Sigma. And those are absolutely important elements to complicated processes. So like that, but that isn't my skill set. I think I am genuinely kind of the person that bridges that process operations piece with people, and maybe bringing a little bit of a kind of a logical process. And so how that's manifested in the jobs that I've been in is, and this is perhaps why this also might be why I'm in startups more often than not, is I do like creating things. I do like the operations piece that I like is the creation of the process. I wouldn't say I'm the guy that you want to maintain your process forever, because that's not stimulating for me. And also that doesn't bring me joy. What I do like to do, though, is build a process and then start kind of iterating on it. And so, like, I kind of am reminded of one of my jobs at Zulily, where we had a process for how we approve images, like because it was in the studio creative team, and there was a lot of images that came in from third parties, and the process started to become like sort of a full-time job, and it was spread out over a bunch of people, and it was pretty monotonous, and nobody really wanted it to be their sole job, and so we came up with this really kind of elegant process, and everybody was like, yeah, this is the process, and so for like 2 months it worked great. And then the third month, it completely fell apart. And at first, I'm like, what? How did this go from like this? Like everybody was on the same page, and they loved this process, and it was really exciting. And then we kind of looked at the numbers, and we're like, oh, the volume of images grew by 400% in 3 months. So it was one of those things where you're like, oh, so the process that we'd come up with was really elegant at what it was that first month, but it really completely blew up the process once that type of growth was experienced. And so when I say that I like creation, I really like that iterative process of here's the process, let's try it out, let's go for it, let's see what happens, and then immediately start, enhancing upon that. And so there was obviously a point when that process stabilized and it scaled well. And then that's great. That's such a satisfactory feeling. And I think going back to your original question, which was, kind of sort of like, why do I like operations and why do I like process? At my heart, I am two things. I love crossing off an item on a checklist, which, I think most project managers or people who do projects love that. And so the ability to mark a bunch of items off of a task list is really important to me. And then two, I do like creation. Like I do like creating things, and operations is a great place to be able to create something that's also organized and allows me to cross off items on a task list. So.
Do you ever write things down that you're almost done with just so you can cross them off?
I guess I'm not even embarrassed to say this, but yes, I am. Because I want the satisfaction of knowing that I did it, even though I know I did it. I want to see it. And so, yes, I am one of the people that will write something down, or like I try to be paperless because I'm also a notorious Post-it note abuser. So I don't actually. I try to keep all paper away from me because I'll start writing things down, and they're actually important. And so I do everything electronic as much as I can. But I use Asana pretty regularly, and Trello, and a few other project things. But I will literally type it out so that I can click the button and get the. So, yeah, I mean, I think it's best to own those types of things, which is like I really like that, and so who am I to keep myself from having that joy?
Yeah. No, I've done that, right, and and we'll get into what we both do. Well, mostly what you do. I'm doing what I do on the side right now at the moment.
Right.
Talking to you, but we'll get into what you do. But it's like, when you also are managing your own work or side projects or whatever, you do have to keep track of things. And there is something nice about just writing down like, oh, send Jim an email. Oh, done, in a minute. But it's satisfying to cross things off. So I agree.
It is. And and I know that there's people that aren't like that. And that's actually great. I'm glad that not everybody's like that. That'd be really boring. So I like that's a skill set that you and I have both made careers out of, which is that not writing things down just to cross them off, but
yeah, don't undermine everything a project manager does, because so many people do that. Right.
But like, I think, when I say that I'm in a niche, I think it's because I am not, and I think this probably applies to both of us as well. Like, I'm not I'm not overly technical. And so when you think of like Six Sigma and Kata and some of those, really process engineering type of work, that doesn't appeal to me because it becomes tedious, right? Mm-hmm. And some people love that. That isn't for me. I like to think that I bring some personality to process. And this also probably goes back to me feeling like I'm a jack of all trades. I like to know a little bit about a lot of things, which is project management's perfect because you tend to work on projects cross-functionally across multiple departments typically. And so, I think that's a good way to learn about a lot about things without truly having to commit to any one thing. I wish that I could be as passionate about process engineering as some of the process engineers I've met over my career. Like I've met people who are just so passionate about Toyota Kata that it's inspiring, right? It's inspiring to see it, and it's also becomes crystal clear that that's not me. So I think when I think a lot of people are always like trying to find your passion, try to find what you love. For me, it's been more of a process of elimination than it has been a process of knowing what that is. But some people know what that is. Like they've known for a long time. And, the grass is always greener, I'm sure. But for me, it's nice. It's nice to know there's people out there that have that type of vision. I'm more of the let's figure this out, what I do and don't like as I move along.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and it leaves you open to different things. So all that being said, I suppose, what's what you feel is like one of your biggest accomplishments at a startup that you can talk about?
Yeah. No, I don't think there's anything that I've done that I couldn't share at this point. It's a good question. This is going to make me sound a little Mother Teresa-ish, which is I don't celebrate my wins well. And I don't know where that comes from, other than, we don't have this, if we wanted to spend a whole podcast, talking about, my childhood to figure out why that I can't take a compliment, we could, but I don't think that's the intent here. I think that for me, this is hard. This perhaps the hardest question because I don't think like that very much. I don't think about like, look at all these accomplishments, but if I were to choose, I would say the hardest job I had was at Zulily. And I say that because the growth there was, it literally went from $0 in sales to $1 billion run rate in 4 years. Like that. And there's very few companies. I think it's literally less than 10 in the last 20 years that have grown that quickly. And so, there's not a lot of blueprints out there to how to do that right. And so it was very difficult. It felt like every day we were both winging it, but also trying to be thoughtful about it. And it just was difficult because, kind of like using that example with the images, like you knew that whatever you built was probably going to change another month or two later. And so, people would get frustrated because things were never stable. Like everybody's looking for stability. Everybody's looking for structure and process. That's what most employees want. Like they want things to be predictable. And that just wasn't the environment that we were in. It was understandable why, because the growth was so astronomical. And so I'd say aside from making it through that successfully, I'd say it was such an excellent learning experience because, I think I learned a lot about how to work with my teams because I was managing people at that point, a lot of people at that point, to kind of like both be authentic and say, yeah, this is hard. Like you had to start from a place of acknowledging like, this isn't normal. This isn't, my previous experience, nothing quite like this had ever happened. But also just saying like, we'll figure it out. And that, we have a lot of smart people here, which we did, and we'll figure it out. And that I'm going to give you flexibility, knowing that this is difficult for you to change, and I hope that you give me the same flexibility that we're trying to figure this out real time. Like it's hard to think about the future when you're so busy in the moment. At least at that job, there was kind of a daily production element to it that it was difficult to think any further out than a month or two when, you're just trying to get done with all of the work that needed to be done today. And so, I'd say that the reason I'm proud, it was both the most difficult, but also the thing that I was most proud of because I felt like I got a 4-year MBA in how to work through a massively growing startup. Like I don't think most people get that opportunity. So I felt very lucky when it was over to not over. The company's still in business. When I took left the company and took some time off to rest because it was a very, like I said, a very difficult job. It was a very very rewarding in the sense of there's things even today that I refer back to absolutely to think and how I think about things now.
Mm-hmm. So, and thinking about actually that time you took off, and you took a while off, and was that a turning point from you in how you thought about your personal time versus your time at work, or did that happen later or sooner?
Yeah, it was definitely the first time ever as an adult that I took more than 2 weeks of time off, mm-hmm. whether it was vacation or between jobs or whatever the case may be. And so it was definitely the first time. I think I ended up taking, it probably was a flat out no work. It was probably 6 months in intentional. Mm-hmm. And there was lots of things about that were scary. Because I had never done that. I would say I spent a decent amount of that time worrying that could I ever get back into the workforce, and would those skills just disappear? And like, there's all of these, the self-reflection that and doubt that most people have in general, but it was amplified because I had time to think about it. And so I do like to keep myself busy and so I found different ways to do that, whether that was, traveling or helping some friends out with her, a friend out with her starting business. There was ways I kept that time filled. But yeah, it was an interesting experience. I know that it's easy. I also know what a privilege it was to be able to take that long time off. Mm-hmm. A lot of people can't afford to do that, and I was very lucky and fortunate to be able to do that. And obviously, I would highly recommend it for everyone because I think it gave me really good perspective. And the other thing that I learned is that the skills stay with you, and the worry was for not. And I definitely would like. Yeah, I still could force myself to remind myself of the lessons learned there, which is like, I always worry, like when I switch jobs, will those skills transfer? And now that it's happened, 5 or 6, I don't know how many times it's happened. I start to feel sillier asking the question because I know the answer to the question, and yet I still do it. So I think I also like though that I never want to be so confident that I don't ask the question. I think humility goes a really long way, and so I think forcing myself to be humble about, I don't want to be so confident about how transferable my skills are, but I also probably don't need to be so critical either, right? I think there's a middle way there.
Yeah, there's you don't have to go all the way to the imposter syndrome route, right?
Right. Yes. Yeah. Which is very real, right? Like that. The part that's crazy about imposter syndrome is like with maybe 1 or 2 exceptions, I don't think I've met anyone that I've worked with and or been friends with who doesn't have some level of that at their work, because we're all just trying to figure it out as we go along, and some do have a much better veneer or gloss to it to make you think that they're not thinking that way. But I've met CEOs, I've met entry-level people, and many people in between, and all of them, almost, I would say like 99% of people fall into somewhere on that spectrum of like, I don't know what I'm doing, and sooner or later they're going to figure that out.
Yeah, and then we've met the ones who we figured it out.
Right.
Yeah, you're right. Yeah, no,
that's right. But then, like, that's a great opportunity. Like, honestly, though, like, if you've got the right relationship with people, you can actually tell them, like, oh, yeah, no, you don't know what you're talking about, but that's okay. Neither do I. And, like, we'll help each other out here because let's be friends.
See, and maybe you could be a little less positive, Jim. Just kidding.
Yeah. It's funny you should say that. I am definitely a glass half full guy. Even when I don't want to be, like, there's times when I want to be like full on pessimistic. And occasionally I am like, I don't, you and I have talked enough over the years to know that like I'm not always 100% positive, no doubt. But I also, particularly with work, I would say I have enough evidence now to see that like it usually works out, and so it's not as bad as it seems usually.
Yeah, no, and I that's true. I mean, it's rare you can ever, if I go to the cognitive behavioral therapy side of me that I've invested in, by going to a therapist, it's rarely like possible to prove whatever negative thought it is, whether it's like this problem at work's never going to change or something personal. You can rarely find evidence to prove that versus the opposite. And so, yeah, if you can jump and skip all those steps, that's even better, you know?
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. So one thing that you've written about, and I'm definitely going to link to your website, and just to be clear, that's your consulting company that you started,
that's
but
right.
Are you still taking work through that if it comes up, or?
It's funny you should ask. No, but it's funny. One of the things I've learned, this probably wasn't the question you're asking, but one of the things that I've learned about myself in this process was, this actually ties right back to what I was just saying before, which is because I get so invested and because I care so much about the work that I'm doing, with one exception, all of the consulting gigs that I took turned into jobs. Mm-hmm. Which I don't know enough. Maybe I must have I clearly misunderstood what the point of consulting was, because as soon as I started working for my clients, I got really invested. They got really invested, and it turned into a job. So, yeah, like almost all of the clients that I had turned into jobs. So I would say that I was probably terrible at consulting because of that, like traditional consulting, because I immediately dove way deeper than probably was needed, which there's pros and cons to that. And, so I lesson learned. So it is active in the sense that, I do have a site and I do have a blog but I haven't updated recently, but, and also, I'm always willing to help. And so I like to keep it up and alive in case something were to come through that I felt like I could really provide value or even just help someone with questions. But I am not actively seeking clients because I actually very shortly have a new job. So, yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So, and this is why conversations with me are never linear, and why I don't. Just one thing I've been asked, and I'll just interrupt this to tell people, like, do I send out questions ahead of time? No, I don't. One reason is I can't stick to a script. So, and I really don't want guests here to stick to one. So that's just for people to know that, because I think a lot of people have asked me that already. Like, or people who are going to be on too, are you going to send questions? Nope, because I want us to have a conversation.
Yeah.
But anyway, so yeah, back to the question. One thing you wrote about, though, is the concept of having a wing person and being a wing person at work. And so we know what the idea of one at a bar is probably, but when you talk about it at work, so I just want to read like a little bit of what you said, and then we'll talk about it. Ideally, he or she is someone you trust and can have an honest, transparent relationship with. They have the ability to keep your conversations private, allowing for open discussions about the lay of the land at the company you work for. They can often be your go-to for important tasks or projects, and they ultimately support your vision. She or he needs to be as invested in your success as you are in theirs. It doesn't work without skin in the game for both parties. All of this goes back to the main requirements of a wing person: trust, honesty, and transparency.
Yeah.
I think if just taking a moment to reflect, and anyone listening, do you have a wing person? Is what I'm asking people who are listening. And if not, then after this, maybe think about why and think about getting one. I know I have had, for sure. For you, it's been very important. So talk a little bit about how you ended up defining wing person this way and what it means to you.
Yeah, so in that time that I took off after Zulily, and that was when the genesis of trying to do consulting, the first thing that I did before I even started the business was I did quite a bit of self-reflection on what are the things I like to do, what are the things I don't like to do, what are the what going so far back as a child, what were the things I wanted to be when I grew up, and how did that translate into actually what I am doing? And it's interesting because there are themes that kind of stood out, which was, and I'll get to your question, but I just say that there was like a foundational thing of me realizing like, oh, when I was a kid, I remember I wanted to be an artist and I wanted to be a writer, and I wanted to be at different times, and I wanted to be a landscape architect, and I wanted to be a filmmaker at one point. And there is a through line, which was going back to the idea of creation and being able to create things, right? There was a creativity element there. And me thinking like, oh, well, my career really hasn't been like that at all. And then me kind of doing that aha moment of, oh, that's actually exactly what I'm doing right now, which is creating things from scratch. So I'm taking that creative energy and putting it in something that is logical. And it's interesting because I never liked math in high school or any grade, but I was never bad at it. I just didn't like it. And so it's interesting because that tells me, like, when I think about logical and creative minds, it's interesting that even when I was young, I was trying to reconcile those two things, which is the idea of creating something out of nothing. And so when to go back to wingman or wingwoman, as the case may be, one of the things I discovered in this self-reflective process was how all of the most enjoyable work experiences I had, I could tie back to where I had these really close, constructive, but professional relationships with either my boss or someone on my team who reported to me or a peer. And it was always came back to, why did I like those relationships so much? And it's like, because we were invested in each other. We were clearly invested in each other's success. And so when I would receive feedback like, hey, you should do this better, it never felt like a failure. It felt like a friend trying to help me out. And there's inherent risks in obviously building friendships at work, but I would never do it any other way. I'd rather deal with the risk of it not working out than the alternative, because that relationship really, the relationships that I've had with my either wing person or I was theirs, I mean, I'm genuinely friends with a vast majority of them to this day, even after I've left working with them, which tells me that they were authentic, that they were real, they were honest and fair and transparent. So I know it's easier said than done, but I really think that the value of having, and wing persons, I think, meant to be, it's meant to capture attention, but it really is just you're looking for an advocate, right? You're looking. I want an advocate for me, and vice versa. I want to advocate for someone, and if you can get to that point with your boss or someone that reports to you, even. There's a lot of really cool things that come out of that. Like, like it makes work more satisfying, and to know that you've got people around you that are invested in your success and vice versa. So, I guess it kind of ties right back to the very beginning of what we were talking about too, which is if you genuinely care about someone and can be vulnerable with the people around you, whether you're managing a people or you're an individual contributor. It's a great place. It's a good place to be. And I felt like that's where my success, at least for my career, has really resided in.
Do you think, I know for me, some of these relationships have led to my next job and stuff like that. I mean, I'll even get, I'm at my current job because I would say a person that I work with now was my wing person at another company I was at. So they were the consultant and I was the client, but we ended up becoming the person we could trust and rely on. And we had to, because I had people on my team I couldn't trust basically, but I could trust them. And I ended up at this where I am now through some series of hoops and events and time off. But
right.
I just think that it leads to other jobs, but also, like you said, in the job having more satisfaction, because it's like if you're not only looking out for yourself but someone else. I don't know, and especially what you talked about earlier, and I'm very similar where I can't brag about myself very well, but I'm definitely always able to do that for someone else and have someone else I can champion, right? And so I don't know. I don't know what the point of what I was saying was, to be honest, other than, I agree. And have you experienced that where it's just kind of led to these greater things?
It really has. In fact, I was just thinking about this a couple of weeks ago because I am starting a new job soon that is directly because of that, because of relationships built. And I actually have, except for the first job out of college, the first startup that I worked at, that one I applied to out of the blue. And was able to get the job. It was an entry-level job, so it wasn't, horribly difficult to do. But every job since then has been because of the relationships I built. There's not one job in the entire rest of my adult career, where the job didn't come from either referral and or someone I worked with previously who, either put a good word in for me or was actively looking to hire me specifically. Absolutely the relationships matter. Not to say you can't get a job out of the blue, that, plenty of people do that all the time, but at least for me, and I guess in some ways that just reinforces that relationship and that being that authentic, genuine person and being that person who cares is something that people like to have around, regardless of what your skills are. Knowing that you have somebody who's genuinely invested, it's much easier to teach people the skills of a job of like, this is how you do X, Y, and Z, but you can't, in my opinion, it's very difficult to train someone to be authentic or to care or to be invested in something. So I'll take kind of that passion and engagement over actual do they know the basics of the job any day, because one is much easier to train than the other.
Mm-hmm. That's true. And and training like even integrity and things like that, it's really hard to teach that, because it's like you don't even know someone doesn't have it until something's happened.
Right.
Exactly. But skills, I know for me, I've been given a chance when I didn't know anything. Like I knew nothing about this program, for example, or like right now I work at Adobe's AEM. I didn't know anything about that when I started working with it, but the person knew I could learn. So, but they also knew that I would work as hard as possible and whatever. So I agree with that. Do you have any specific, do you see a difference between the wing person and a mentor?
Yeah, and I would say they're probably the same. I think the mentor relationship, that's a good question, because I'd say the word mentor perhaps has some preconceived notions of what a mentor is, which is it is definitely I know more than you, and not in a oppressive or ego kind of way, but a mentor is someone who is there to teach you something and help develop you. And a wing person could be that, certainly, but the power dynamics there are very top down, and where I felt like I've had the best relationships with my bosses and vice versa when I've had people who I considered wing persons with me. It's been a much more, felt like we were equals. Not that we couldn't teach each other stuff, because we could, but it never felt too, or at least to me, it never felt too heavy-handed one way or the other. It's more of it's more of an equal relationship than a mentor. Not to say that mentors and wing persons couldn't be the same. They could, but I guess it's more about personalities and approach and all that. But yeah.
Mm-hmm. So in thinking about, like, say someone's now come to this point and they go, I don't have this kind of person I'd like one, but I don't know who I would identify as that. What do you say?
Yeah, I'd say starting out in a new job, you should get a lay of the land. You should not just immediately go, "You are going to be my wing person. Let's do it."
Buddy.
Buddy, yeah, exactly. That's not that isn't the way it works. It does, kind of the through line through all of this is it has to be feel organic and genuine. And so I think it's good to build relationships, get to know as many people as possible, both if you're managing people or whoever your boss or bosses are, and build relationship there and build that trust in then it's better. And it's not like I've never had the conversation with anyone of like, hey, you're going to be my wing person, or I'm going to be your wing person. it felt like natural there, which is in it, without saying the words, you can certainly say, I definitely have said to many of my bosses, what do you need from me so that you can be successful? Because your success is my success. And that's true. When you start from a position like that of how can I help you be successful, that tends to be disarming because people will go, oh, how often there's plenty of people I've managed that have never asked me that question. So, just as soon as you have someone that reports to you that's asking you that question, immediately you're going to listen. And then two, it shows that in return, you don't have to say, well, I'll support you if you support me. It's not like a back scratch thing, but it kind of happens naturally, which is like if I, at least for all of the bosses that I've served for that we remain friends today, it was definitely it became mutual, which was because I was interested in their success, they also were interested in mine. And whether that was, strictly from a succession planning perspective, because we're like, oh, here's someone who is interested in learning what I do, or something, or maybe something more organic or not non-specific like that, which was, I like being around people who are interested in my success, and in return, I feel I guess kindness begets kindness is probably right. Like the people instinctually want to be good when people are good to them. And so, and I don't want to make it sound transactional because it isn't. Because I think the moment going back to the person who had to fake it to make it on the empathy front, I don't think that it can't be transactional. If you can't get to a point where you genuinely feel it, then don't waste your time. And you have to genuinely feel it, and not everyone will be able to do that. Like not everyone can be in that genuine space. I get it. Sometimes I wish I could do that. Like we talked about. Like sometimes I wish I could turn it off and just focus on the deliverables and not get so invested in the kind of the emotion of a project or a process. But that's not who I am. It's taken a long time to figure that out, but it's not who I am. I clearly have to be that way.
Yeah, that's great. And so looking now beyond this, you've take all your skills and all your interpersonal relationships and everything. What brought you to be a White Salmon City Council member number 4?
Number 4. Yeah.
I like that you're number 4. Like if I just want to look up like Jim Ransier number 4 and just see what comes up.
Yeah, it's funny too because we're in a town small enough that I don't know why they're numbered because we don't have wards. I've lived in big cities. We don't have districts. We don't have wards. All the council members represent all the city residents. So I don't know why they're numbered, other than maybe just to differentiate between who's 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. But yeah. This is actually kind of it's just now kind of occurring to me real time on this call. But there was one of the people who was my boss had planted a seed a long time ago when I was had left a job and we stayed friends. And one of the conversations, he's like, have you ever thought about doing anything political? He's like, I think you'd be really good at it because he's like, who doesn't want a politician that cares about people? And I was like, oh yeah. And I hadn't thought about it. It never really entertained the idea or the notion of it. And so it just sat there in my head. not like it wasn't an action item. It wasn't here's my strategy or here's my plan. And then it kind of just it really just I'm not super into if you think positive things will manifest themselves. I'm not into The Secret, but I would say that like there are coincidences sometimes where you're just like, that was a particularly unique coincidence. And so whether that was the universe or not is open for debate. But there was an opening on the city council in January of 2020. And that opening you can apply for. They don't do special elections. Again, small town, it's not worth doing a special election. So the council actually receives applications. They review the applications. You go in front of the council, explain why you want to be on the city council, and then they decide in a closed session. Well, they don't decide in a closed session. They discuss in a closed session, and then they do a straw poll, and that's how they select. And so I did that in January. Did not get it. It was, and I kind of took it as like, well, then maybe it wasn't meant to be at this moment. It wasn't like a never, but it was definitely that's okay. Like, I'm busy with work. I've got other things going on. It's not the end of the world. And then it opened up. I actually didn't know it had opened up a second time in July. One of the city council members happened to see me on the street because, again, small town. And he's like, "Hey, are you applying again?" And I didn't even know there was an opening. He's like, "Hey, if you're interested, you should apply." And so I applied again. And obviously, in government, things change significantly between January and July when it comes to, things like global pandemics. And so, the answers, my priorities for the city changed from what I had proposed in January versus in July. And yeah, it was, there were 3 applicants again. This time I was selected. And so my term lasts through the end of 2021. And I think sometime this coming summer, is when I would need to decide if I'd like to run for the position. So I've got a little more time to kind of think about that. I think for someone who's interested in politics, but also wary about dipping their toes in, this perhaps was like the best possible scenario, which was I get a chance to see what the work is like and if I like that work. And, again, like I said before, I don't claim to know anything. And so being very humble and open to feedback from others has been really valuable during it. So it's been, so far has been a good experience. So there's the background, at least, on how I got into that spot.
It's really cool, though. And have you become either disillusioned about anything or more hopeful about things as a result of this? Is there anything that's happened that?
The saying, all politics are local. And that is true because, our town is very much just a microcosm of everything you see at a national level. Things like Black Lives Matters comes up in a town of our size. Things like defund the police have come up in a town of our size. And, how those ideas and those challenges are translated to a town of our size is different than it would if I lived in Seattle or Portland or, cities that have large budgets. In our world, defund the police means we actually would just have less coverage because we don't have so many police officers that there are 2 police officers at any given time. We have time, it's 1 police officer at any given time. And if you were to defund the police position, for example, you would just reduce your coverage. So I don't think anyone here in our town is both, regardless of your political affiliation, is advocating for defund the police. That being said, our council and our mayor, who I'm a huge fan of, she proposed in the 2021 budget kind of an initial to start contract position for social work to help the police. And to full credit to be given, the chief of police, he more than anyone had been pushing for that. He and I have met in person. I've done a ride along with one of the officers, so I've had some conversations with the local community, policing community, about things like Black Lives Matters and defund the police, and everyone seems to be on the same page when it comes to police officers. They didn't go to school and or become police officers to become social workers. That's not their passion, and they would absolutely want help and assistance on that front. Whether it's working with people who are homeless, people domestic violence disputes, and mental health calls. Those are all things that there's only so much training that you can get on that unless you have an actual professional, medical professional there to assist. And so the part that's like, so going back to your question of like, am I optimistic or not? It's been clearly in something that I had not necessarily made the connection that, all politics are local really does mean like things of these massive social movements and how they are reflected in our local community. I don't know if I would have ever kind of made those connections until now. And now that I see how, one size doesn't fit all, and that, the solution to defund the police in a big city is a very different proposal than it would be in our town. You're not hearing anyone here say defund the police because that isn't realistic. What's realistic is getting the support, and that started with the police chief pushing for it, the mayor advocating for it, and then the council, we voted on the 2021 budget that included that position. And so if that position, I think, becomes really successful, then it would ultimately lead, I think, to a full-time position, which is, I think, what I think most people would be interested in seeing and happening. So I guess that was a long-winded question to say that I am optimistic because what's great about at least my town and the council that I work with, and I was thinking about this just on Wednesday when we had our last council meeting, and Wednesday just so happened to be for people on the timeline. There was a pretty big news event that happened on Wednesday with the riot at the U.S. Capitol. I just felt so lucky to be with. I know that not everyone on the city council is on the same political spectrum that I am, but I have so much respect for all of them because this is essentially a volunteer position. You do get paid a little tiny stipend of sorts for the hour and a half, 2 hours that you put into the actual council meeting. But just, here are people who have taken time. All of us are taking time out of our personal lives for the betterment of our community. Everyone, at least on this council, as far as I can tell, is very invested in our town. And so we all come at it from a different angle, but it's been nothing but respectful, nothing but we don't always agree on everything. But we do seem to agree on the foundational elements of what politics should be, which is we're very respectful of each other. None of us are doing this for anything other than we want to help our community be successful. And so I feel a little spoiled in that sense because the town that I'm in is turned out to just be so amazing. And, I don't want to sound like the White Salmon Tourist Board, but and obviously I'm biased because I'm clearly on the city council. But I just felt so lucky, and knowing how partisan and really what a complete mess Wednesday was at the U.S. Capitol, to be able to kind of look into the faces of through Zoom because we can't meet in person because of the global pandemic. It's just been such. I don't dare say a blessing, but it's just been a complete joy to work with the people on our council because they're just all so interested in helping. So I don't know. I'm gushing a little, but it's been a really good experience so far, all things considered. With what's going on in politics.
Yeah, and that was, so we're recording this. It'll be up a little bit later in the year, but we're recording this the Friday after what happened, and I'd say still processing. I'm still processing.
I'm still processing. Yes.
Yeah. But that's good to hear. And I guess that would bring me to a question about you've worked on nonprofits before and on a board, and I think just around the idea of service, which is something that's super important to me, so I'll often touch on it with people. And in other interviews, I've actually had people go, "Oh yeah, and I do this," and they didn't even think about that being a relevant thing. But I think how we spend our time outside of work is very important as much as work. So have you found similarities between doing this work on the city council and being on a board of a nonprofit, and kind of, since you have consistently chosen to spend your spare time doing these things other than, what we all do is Netflix and stuff, but then these things, right. Just what are you finding that you're getting from those things? And maybe, like I asked, I guess already too, is it similar or different?
It is similar. It does kind of like scratch the same itch, right? Which is that desire to contribute more to your community, however you can do that. Like, and not everybody can serve on the city council, not everybody, whether, time or interest, or not everybody can serve on a board of a nonprofit, but most people, and this is true, but I lived in Seattle, I've lived in big cities, I've lived obviously here in small towns. The thing that really stands out to me is most people want to help. And so it's been really just, it's been great to be around people like that. Like it's good for the soul to be around people who are donating their time and or money to the betterment of people, or the environment, or, like there's 1,000 different nonprofits out there, right? More than 1,000, 1 million. But like the nonprofit that I worked with in Seattle, which was Youth in Focus, which was working with at-risk youth and teaching them actual photography, meaning film photography, not digital. They do digital as well, but giving a voice to at-risk youth who never, some of them never had been asked what their opinion was on anything ever. Like this was the first time someone said, here's a camera. We want to see what you feel, what your vision is, what your perspective or point of view is. And for some, that's the first time someone's ever told them that, like, which is mine, I feel just another great example of how fortunate I felt growing up. But like, I had a family that was very interested. My mother was very interested in what I was thinking and feeling, and my perspective, and my teachers. And so, there's a whole nother podcast there about the privileges of that. But it really was, it's really nice and rewarding to work with organizations where you can give people a voice who don't know they have one. And so maybe that's that for me, that might be what the types of nonprofits and city council that have appealed to me is, being able to give a voice to those who don't always know they have one. And so I really, I highly recommend anyone who's ever interested in working with nonprofits. Like, to just a little context of how I even got on my first board. I don't even know where I saw this. It may have been even Facebook, but there's a nonprofit, Seattle Foundation in Seattle, which is kind of I can't even think of the right word. They essentially they support other nonprofits. And so one of the things they do is they offer a one-day training session on how to be a board member at a nonprofit. And it's like, oh, that sounds interesting. I've never even thought of that. And so I took the class, and then one of the things that they do at the end is they say, okay, in a couple of weeks, we have a nonprofit dating, which we essentially show up. There's a bunch of nonprofits who are looking for board members, and you can kind of choose a couple that you want to talk to. And you literally, it's like speed dating. It's like you spend a couple minutes going around talking to everyone. And that's how I found Youth in Focus, actually. And it was great because there was definitely 3 or 4 nonprofits I was interested in that I talked to. But it was as soon as I talked to Youth in Focus, I knew. I was like, oh, this is the one I want. And it was great because they also wanted me. But nonprofits are, I mean, in general, nonprofits are desperate for board members. They're desperate for people to help further the vision. They're desperate for people to help with fundraising. I knew nothing about fundraising when I started. And, it turns out that it's pretty straightforward. You just need to, ask people for money and just say, hey, like, whether it's $5 or $500, hey, and it's really just working your network, your friends and family, and just saying, hey, do you, and you obviously know all about fundraising with nonprofits that you've worked with.
Like, sorry, but I'm going to ask again. Yeah.
Right. I know that in fact, that's funny you should say it. I know for a fact I put social media posts like, I know I've sent this 3 times in the last week, but I'm sending it a 4th time, which is we're still fundraising. And so, but it is very satisfying when you hit your fundraising goals, because you know that then the mission of the nonprofit that you're trying to support is going to continue. And, most nonprofits, like, I don't know what people think in general, but most nonprofits are, if they're lucky, they have 3 to 6 months of funding sitting there, like, meaning that if they didn't raise another dollar, they'd be out of money in 3 to 6 months. That's most nonprofits. And so that's why nonprofits are always fundraising, because they got to keep that padding there. Otherwise, you can't weather economic downturn. You can't weather any type of financial situation that comes up. So anyway, yeah.
Cool.
Yeah.
Well, that's good. And it's funny. I don't think I've heard that story before. So that was great. And like I said, I think it's one of the most important ways we can spend our time is to give back to the community, especially when we're fortunate to be living a certain way within our communities,
Right. Yeah.
And the pandemic has showed us that for sure.
Yeah.
So do you have I'm going to pause. Did we not cover something you want to cover?
No, we covered everything. That was great.
Okay, cool.
Yeah, love it.
All right. So do you have any advice or mantra? I mean, we've talked a lot, so we've got quite a bit of kind of advice, not called advice, kind of. But do you have any like mantra or advice that you like to share with people in general? Just a thing you repeat or have on a Post-it, since you're a Post-it guy?
Yeah, I don't have a mantra. Though I will say that one of the things that I discovered when I was forced myself to kind of essentially create my own or understand my own motivations in my life and career, one of the things that I continue to come back to is I'm happy that I'm a work in progress. I have to remind myself of that, because I think. Also, what would I do if I wasn't a work in progress and I was just done? What does that mean? I don't even know what that means. So I should be happy, and happy is probably a strong one, because I think happy is a loaded word. I should be content with being a work in progress. And so I would say, like, if there was one thing that I'm reminding myself often is I'm a work in progress, and I want to be comfortable with that. And I hope, I think that's that's also something I'm working on, is being comfortable with being a work in progress. So yeah, I don't know if that's a mantra, but I would just say that's, I'd love to impart that on everyone who is listening, which is we're all works in progress, and that's okay. And it's okay to show that vulnerability. Most people, I don't have any friends that have it all figured out, as far as I can tell. So, and that doesn't make me love them any less. It actually makes me love them more.
Mm-hmm. Cool. All right. Well, I have a series of questions that I call the Fun 5, and I'd like to just go through those with you and have fun with them.
Okay. Okay.
So this one is really just me trying to justify the fact that I've kept so many old t-shirts, but what's like the oldest t-shirt you have and still wear?
And still wear. That's the hard part, right?
It could be just have too. If it's
so this says a little bit about me as a person too, which is I am notorious for throwing things out quickly. And so I'd say probably the oldest T-shirt that I have is that I wear is probably not even a year old.
Oh my gosh.
And it would be like, it'd be like probably like, plain plain blue T-shirt from Banana Republic that I probably got for like $12.99 at the outlet. So there's nothing special there. I do have some old T-shirts stored away. We have stored away in a box of kind of like concert T-shirts, and so I know I have some older concert T-shirts there. I think Madonna from what would have that? I guess that would have been 2001. So that probably been the oldest concert T-shirt I have. So yeah, let's say Madonna 2001, even though I'm not wearing it.
All right, cool. What tour was that? I was trying because we went the one when Obama was.
That's right.
Yeah,
we actually have seen Madonna together at the same time, which is that's right.
Right?
It was at Petco Park, and we found out literally in the middle of a Madonna concert that Obama had won in 2008. It really probably can't get better than that.
No, that was Hard Candy, right? I guess or something. Yeah, so you were at an earlier one. All right, and well, we're in 2021, but this question stands. If every day was really Groundhog's Day, like it seems to have been for a while now, what song would you have your alarm clock play it every morning?
It would have to be something poppy. We already talked about Madonna, so I was a big Madonna. I have been a big Madonna fan for a long time. So it'd be maybe something like I'm trying to think of a Madonna song that I'd want to hear every day for eternity.
That's the thing. You kind of have to hear it every day.
Yeah. I feel like, I don't know why I'm thinking this, but I'm just going to say it. Papa Don't Preach. Which feels very, it feels really spot on to hear that one over and over and over. It's got some orchestral in it. It's got some pop. That might be fun. So I'll say Papa Don't Preach.
All right. That's good.
I was going to say, if we're going for a second place song, it just occurred to me, I would absolutely be okay with U2's Where the Streets Have No Name. I love that song. So I'd say like the Madonna one would be for my own nostalgia purposes, but I'd say Where the Streets Have No Name by U2 would be a fantastic, not that you asked for two songs, but there you go. You know, a second one.
Yeah. Well, and I'm actually, by the time this airs, I should have a Spotify playlist of all the songs people have said, because I thought that'd be fun. So you'll have two. You'll get two.
Awesome.
All right. Good for you. All right. This one, I know the answer to, I'm pretty sure, but coffee or tea or neither?
The answer is definitely coffee. But you know what's funny about coffee? So I can tell you the day that I started drinking coffee. I know exactly the day, which is it was Tuesday after Labor Day of 2010. Like I know exactly the day because it was recent. Like I did not like coffee. I didn't like it. I didn't like tea. I like tea as well now. But I got a job at Zulily. That was my first day at that job. And the start time, because at least initially I was helping run the call center, was 6 a.m. And so I was like, it doesn't matter if I like coffee. I need caffeine to be able to be awake and successful at this job. And very quickly, as soon as I became a Starbucks fiend after that, like it was like, double shot for breakfast, a mocha for lunch. Like it was a thing. So yeah, coffee for sure. For me now. Love it.
Nice. When was the last time, or a time you remember, because last time's kind of tricky, that you like laughed so hard you cried or just couldn't stop, or maybe just as something that makes you do that?
I'm sure it was a movie or TV show. I'm trying to think if I could tell you right off the bat, because I can definitely know that we're in the house that I'm in now. I've had at least a few of those. Actually, the one that really comes to mind was neither. It was a group of us were playing a game called Drawing Without Dignity, which is essentially Cards Against Humanity, but essentially not charades, but Pictionary style. So you have to draw offensive things on paper, and it's actually quite fun. But that was the last time that I laughed so hard that I couldn't breathe. So
nice. All right. And the last of the 5, who inspires you right now?
What a great question. I'm going to say, and I think I kind of touched on this a little, but both the city council and the mayor, I'm very inspired by the people that I'm working with on that front. And the mayor in particular, she is, I mean, she's kind of like Superwoman, and she's amazing. She's super friendly, very personable. She literally became mayor during a pandemic. She had a child during the pandemic, and wow. She's mayor, and she has a job, and the list is really long, and she's just so wonderful and caring about her community. And so, the first thing that popped into my mind was her, because she really is a super woman. And so it's just been a pleasure to get to know her, because she's just good people. So she inspires me because she inspires me not because she just works hard, because clearly all of those things require hard work. But she's just she kind of makes it look easy, and I know it's not. There's no way it is. But she really is. It's inspiring to see someone be able to be so committed to her community, but also work really hard.
Yeah, oh, that's cool. That's nice, actually. All right, so that's all my questions. Just, do you have anything you want people to specifically look up? And I'll put everything in show notes or promote.
No, I'm definitely not a social media influencer, so I don't need. No one needs to follow me or anywhere. I am on Instagram, but I don't think I posted Instagram in probably 2 or 3 years. So I think I don't think I need to share it. I don't have anything. I'm nothing to promote other than do your best to care about the people around you.
And visit White Salmon
And visit White Salmon, Washington. We love visitors. Maybe wait until you can do something here besides stand outside.
All right. Well, Jim, this was super. And thanks so much for taking the time to do this.
Thank you so much for having me, Robbie. I really appreciate it.
Cool. Thanks for joining me this week. You can find out more about our guest in the show notes. The music you're probably moving to by now is by Joe Mafia. Find him on Spotify. That's Joe, Maffia. And Rob Medke is responsible for our visual design. You can find him online by searching for Rob, Metke. Thanks, Rob. Let us know who you'd like to hear from, or about your own experiences defining yourself outside of work at More Than Work Pod on Facebook, Instagram, or Twitter. Give us a follow. Or visit our website at rabiasaid.com. Subscribe on Spotify, Apple, or wherever you get your podcasts. Thanks for listening to More Than Work. We'll be back next week with another guest. In the meantime, while being kind to others, don't forget to be kind to yourself.